Let's jump into this first story. I love this one. From the Hill. First Republic fallout. Democrats fume as regulators bail out yet another failed bank. What I love about this is that they're like, while Democrats aren't arguing the Biden administration should have let First Republic fail, many are concerned that the current spate of bank rescues point to financial stability concerns. I love it. Democrats basically coming out and being like, I can't believe they'd bail out another bank. I mean, we wanted them to do it, but we're so shocked that they didn't. We're angry. Yeah, they wanted this to happen. They say the San Francisco-based regional powerhouse is the third major U.S. bank to fail and prompt a government administrative bailout of depositors following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in March. It is the second largest bank collapse in U.S. history, eclipsing Silicon Valley Bank. I love this because it's like, no one seems to care.
It's like just another domino falling.
It's almost like it's not news that our banking system is collapsing. I wake up, it's 6 a.m. I look at my phone and I'm like, my eyes are like stuck shut. And I'm like, what's going on here? And I look at my phone and it's like the federal government seized First Republic Bank this morning and sold it to JP Morgan with $50 billion in financing from them. And I'm like, wait, what? At 4 a.m. they did this? Wow, it sounds like it's all falling apart. And then throughout the rest of the day, like no one's talking about it.
The first thing I saw was your tweet. And I was like, oh, we got to write about this right away. That was our first story out today.
And everyone was like, oh, wow, how about that? Do you guys hear Vice is going bankrupt? It's like, dude, our banking system is bankrupt.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but Vice sucks.
That's also true. I mean, look, our banking system sucks too. Our banking system also sucks.
I guess the issue is like, we know the banks are failing, but what do we do?
I feel like
exactly.
I feel like everybody, that's kind of like the situation. Everyone knows, everyone's aware of how much money has been printed in the past 5 years, how much money they printed. It was, unprecedented amounts of money. We are basically ascribing to an unprecedented monetary policy. Modern monetary theory is essentially, it's a new idea. Yeah. It's not been tested. We don't know exactly how much stress the system can take. And so far, thankfully, things haven't gone terribly wrong, but there's no reason to believe that something can't happen tomorrow. And a lot of everything fall apart.
And a lot of the money that got spent over the past few years got spent really willy-nilly.
Yep.
Like, I know that I remember in Washington State, a bunch of the money that went out that was like extra unemployment actually went to Africa. There was like a whole scam going on. They were like, oh, we're unemployed. Don't check our IP addresses. And nobody did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just First Republic got really into NFTs. And they got all those Bored Apes. I guess
Bored Apes and the Donald Trump NFTs.
You know what they were really doing? Apparently, it's been reported. They were giving interest-only loans to ultra-wealthy individuals. They were just buying penthouses for rich people, and then like no money down.
Like BLM?
It seems like the Titanic hit the iceberg a long time ago, and the rich people have been extracting as much as they can to bail out as it's sinking to the ground.
I mean, that's
like 2,000 people left New York. 2,000 millionaires left New York.
It was like 250,000 people left Manhattan, which is also higher income.
Yeah, and then it was like, but there were like actually 2,000 legit millionaires.
And then where do they go? Florida, I guess.
A bunch of them went to Florida.
Yeah, New Zealand bunkers or something.
Yeah, just get the hell out.
They can get to Montana where they have the old nuclear silos.
Right.
And they're
I got to give a shout out to Jim Cramer. He's undefeated.
Completely undefeated.
He has that tweet where he's like, First Republic, good bank.
He's like, everybody move to New York. Go over there. Pack your stuff up.
He said something positive about Bitcoin the other day, and I'm like, no, Jim, no, Jim,
no.
Stop. What are you doing, Cramer?
My gosh.
Well, no, maybe that's the one thing where it's like, maybe I'll move my assets. if he's recommended, I'm getting out because I don't know what's going on here. But maybe he's created the inverse Cramer effect where they actually are good banks. But by him shouting it out, everyone panics and then pulls their money out.
He's like, I want to burn it all down.
He's just been studying the economy for years, and he sees the corruption in the system. I will be its reckoning.
Yeah,
behind the scenes, he's just calling these institutions out so people lose faith in them.
Yes,
he's actually he's burning it all down.
If he'd have made that tweet in Mandarin, Bitcoin would have crumbled because the people in China would have understood. But
what I find really funny about this story is that there's a whole bunch of stories where it's like there is no banking crisis. Experts say it's all media nonsense, and don't worry, nothing bad's happening. And from March until 3 days ago, all of the news stories were there is no banking crisis. Yep. It's all being overhyped. And then 2 days before, the U.S. government seizes the second largest bank, it's the second largest collapse seized by the U.S. government. ABC runs a story saying, is the banking collapse over? And I'm like,
Right.
wait. Y'all were saying there was no banking collapse in the corporate media. And then right before this collapse, you're like, is it over? Well, answer was no. But here's my concern. JP Morgan gets $50 billion in federal financing. So basically, we are, maybe not the taxpayer, but we as regular people are all footing the bill because it's just tied to the FDIC is supposed to be for us. It's supposed to be insuring our money.
Right. And instead, they're using it to
Finance the
exactly.
sale to JP Morgan. But here's my thought process. It's just me. And I understand why people in media will just say like, everything's fine. Because they don't want to run on the banks. So recognizing that, I'm going to be completely honest. If I had money in JP Morgan, I would have gone first thing today and pulled it all out. All of it.
Every penny, huh?
Every penny. Because JP Morgan just bought a necrotic multi-billion dollar asset.
With 84 branches.
And with government financing. Meaning the only reason they made this, the only reason this was possible is the government, because I'll just say the FDIC gave $50 billion in fixed rate financing. So JP Morgan was not capable of absorbing this without the federal government's intervention. So I'm kind of like, why should I believe they can rescue this failing
Well, and the other thing
bank?
too is the FDIC has said that they were going to put a new program in place to make banks pay more money for this bank bailout insurance fund. Like that's coming up too.
I think JP Morgan is not going to be able to handle it.
Well, are any of the banks going to be able to handle this kind of thing? And they're all going to be expected to pay into this new fund.
Right. The argument, I guess, was JP Morgan was saying that when people fled First Republic, they went to Chase and they brought that money with them. But imagine you're like on a sinking ship.
Right.
And you're like, quick, everyone jump to that ship.
Yeah.
And then the other ship is like, yeah, actually, we're that's part of our fleet too. And we're like connected to it. They're going to be like,
we don't have that many lifeboats.
We were running from that bank and now our money's right back with them.
I mean, at this point, it really is a situation where people are kind of on their own figuring out where the safe places to go is, because there's got to be contagion from this bank or from the other banks that are going to be brought to JP Morgan. I assume JP Morgan is alleged to be able to handle it. The government is going to back it up. But again, what happens if something unprecedented happens? What if
they can only handle it because the FDIC gave them $50 billion.
Yeah.
A promissory note. So if JP Morgan could not do it on their own without government support, why would I assume they're going to be able to manage this properly?
Well, because the government will keep writing checks. So it's essentially you're betting on the U.S. government.
So why didn't the government just write a check to First Republic and keep them afloat?
I don't know exactly what the thought process was, but
there's something else going on there.
Then
I
there's something.
imagine-
Then my issue there is, okay,
I think
if they're going to write a $50 billion check to JP Morgan, why not just write a $50 billion check to First Republic?
Because they don't want to because then it would be looked at as nationalizing the bank. If the government gives
They did.
I know, but I think it's going to be a situation of just they're going to say, oh, well, it's not nationalized because JP Morgan's running it, blah, blah, blah. Even though they're financing it or funding it, if the government just says we're taking over and we're going to send regulators from the SEC in or whatever the regulating body is, if they just send them in, then it becomes a situation where they're going to be like, no, it's government bank. Because that was the problem, or that was a concern back in 2008. They didn't want to have Goldman Sachs look like it was being owned by the government. And people are allergic to nationalizing.
They want someone, they want it to be taken over, but they want a private company to be the one doing it.
At the very least, so that way they can say that it's not nationalized. So they can say that the government didn't take over the bank.
If there's an ulterior motive, it just sounds like they're being shady. And once again, if I use Chase, I would be gone. That's just me. I mean... And I get it. The reason why people like Jim Cramer come out and they're like, everything's fine, even though it's not, is because they don't want to create the self-fulfilling prophecy where you go in the media, say everything's not fine, causing a run on the banks. So
Well, that's what
I don't want
happened
this
with
system to
SVB,
collapse.
right? SVB was
Right.
like Twitter conversation, and then there was a run on the bank.
Well, it's also
And First Republic was the same thing. When they started getting hit, people started pulling their money out, causing it to collapse.
Right.
I wonder if Occupy Wall Street activists are cheering this on right now. It's like everything they've ever wanted.
Well, they probably have all their money in Chase.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
Tim, I mean, like if I sat you down and I was like, Tim, everything's going to be okay. Do you understand? Everything's all right.
It's not your fault.
It's okay. Everything's fine. You'd be like, what's going to happen? I mean, what's going on? Whenever someone feels the need to reassure you,
It's like Goodwill Hunting. It's not your fault.
it's not your fault. I'm thinking more.
Stop saying that.
Do you remember? Do you remember at the end of The Dark Knight when, not to spoil it or anything, but when Harvey Dent's like, have you ever told someone everything's going to be okay when you know it isn't? That's Jim Cramer right now.
Someone
It's like,
should
do you
make
have
that.
any idea what it's like?
Someone should make that meme where he's yelling at Jim Cramer, because that's literally what the dude has done.
I
Yeah,
never
man.
do that. I never say everything's going to be okay.
Based. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to be okay. I do know that
No,
if
like eventually we're all going to be dead. Like,
Yes!
it's not okay.
But that might, if you get to heaven, that's
when
okay.
That's when everything's actually okay.
right, when you can't, when
you know,
okay has
but-
no meaning.
Well, you have nothing to complain about.
But I mean,
Or-
like living a long and healthy life and dying of old age surrounded by loved ones
That's
is
okay.
okay.
no, that sounds great.
Right. So like everything will be
I
okay.
aspire to that kind of death. I hope.
I mean,
for it.
it's just the human experience,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, I understand why everyone's coming out and saying it's going to be okay, but you got to understand the people who are saying that to you, they may claim to have noble reasons, but they're pulling their assets and they're putting it somewhere else.
But where are they putting it? Like,
China.
where do you put it? China.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like
Put
a
it in
safe
their
bet.
mattresses.
Eventually, we'll have some sort of like tariff situation. We won't be able to get our money out of there.
For sure. But if you're rich, you're probably going to worry about it. I mean, Panama.
Right.
El Salvador, they're probably buying tons of Bitcoin.
So-
like, I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin skyrockets. There have been predictions that a few months ago, several people were predicting that Bitcoin would hit $1 million soon.
Yeah.
And who was that? He's an economist or whatever, and he said it was going to hit $1 million, and he would make a bet with somebody that it would. Everybody said the amount of increase in Bitcoin due to him creating this narrative is going to cover any potential losses from giving away $1 million. So they didn't believe him. But the point he made was that the banks are insolvent. They're holding they're holding way more liabilities than they have assets, and they're unrealized losses. And as soon as this comes in the next few months, the dollar is going to collapse. Bitcoin's going to skyrocket. And then this happens. The second biggest collapse in U.S. history, happening with two other major collapses in the span of a couple months.
You know what's interesting is Chase, like J.P. Morgan in the first place back in like 1913 or something like that. He didn't, when there was like a run on banks, there was a run on local banks, and all the local banks had their money invested with regional banks, and the regional banks had their money invested with, banks in New York and everything. So when there was a run on the banks, the local banks, they couldn't get their money out fast enough to cover it, because it was all invested basically upstream. But JP Morgan thought that there should be a private banking back situation where like it was not nationalized at all, but all of the banks got together and basically created their own kind of, FDIC, but it was for the banks themselves and private. And instead it ended up being, you had like the Federal Reserve Act.
So someone chatted that Valley National Bank is also falling right now, and I just looked it up, and like it's in the news. They're starting to fall now. Minus 20%.
My goodness gracious.
Does anybody have a clear memory of what it was that made the average person realize that the banking crisis was happening in 2008? As far as I remember,
Bear
it was
Stearns, probably.
I thought it was.
Was it Lehman? Wasn't it Lehman?
Well, Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns were banks that were involved, but I'm wondering what it was that made the average person. Was it because I thought it was because the companies like GE weren't able to get credit from other companies to make their payroll, and I'm wondering if there has to be a catalyst to make the average person aware if they're not. It's like if you don't have your money in any of these particular four banks, you kind of might just not really pay attention. Oh, a bank failed, and then go about your day, and it doesn't really affect you unless there's something that makes it go. Makes it become everyone's problem, and I'm wondering if anyone has any insight on that, what it was back in 2008, or if there's something.
I had very little money in 2008, so I don't remember at all.
Fair enough.
Speaking of having very little money, let's jump to our next story.
Well, hold on. This is not financial advice, but I'm going to buy a bunch of NFTs, print them out, and stuff them in my mattress. That's it.
That's a really clever idea.
Great idea.
I think
Thank you.
that's brilliant.
Great idea.
The banks will
Good
never
luck.
get it.
Use the good picture paper too. The stuff like
The glossy stuff.
Exactly.
They will
glossy.
retain their value.
and
Yeah.
they're just different NFTs of your face.
Exactly. I'll make my own NFTs, drive the price down, buy them up, then stuff them in my mattress once the price point is high.
Because they're yours.
Not financial advice.
You just figure out what they're worth.
That's basically what Sam Bankman-Fried did.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.